Senator Canavan.
Thank you, Mr Acting Deputy President, and I'd like to start off where Senator Dastyari left off, and that is that I do think all views should be respected in this debate, and I certainly do respect colleagues of mine, friends of mine, family of mine who have a different view than my own, which is in support of traditional marriage. And I also want to say up front that I do support the removal of any practical discrimination against homosexual or same-sex couples. That is something that we should do and ensure that happens, and I believe we've largely achieved that over a period of time. However, if there are instances of discrimination for same-sex couples, that should be removed. Now, whether or not the definition of marriage in our existing legislation is discrimination itself is a matter for debate, in my view, is a matter that we need to consider very clearly, and we should consider it very clearly because, of course, the definition in our Marriage Act that we have today is one that has been the same for centuries, for millennia, not just in our culture, not just in the religions that have been common in this country, but in almost every culture in the world over the span of millennia. Marriage has been an institution that enshrines the union of a man and a woman, now often with the intention of creating children. Now, I fully admit in modern times and in this country and in developed countries generally, marriage has had a tough time of it. Marriage has had a tough time in the last few decades. The experience and stability of many marriages has been more difficult or less consistent in the past few decades than previously in other generations and in other cultures. And I believe that's unfortunate. I think it's a great tragedy when marriages do break down, particularly where children are involved. I believe that firmly from my own personal experience, but I also believe that firmly from the evidence that exists about the importance of a child having their biological mother and father to raise them. Now, of course, that doesn't always happen. That can't always happen. Tragedies occur, unfortunate things happen in our society, but just because we can't make things perfect doesn't mean that we should not strive for perfection. Just because something is good and not perfect doesn't mean we should make it the enemy of the perfect. And I still believe that we should, regardless of what may happen to our marriage legislation in this country in the next few years, we should passionately defend and support the institution of family, passionately defend the importance of mothers and fathers staying together to look after their kids, because every time that can't happen, it's a very difficult situation for the children involved. As I said, I have come to this position not from a religious one at all, in fact, but very much from a personal one in the first instance. My own father, his father, took off when he was a little kid. And I don't want to go into all the details, but my dad's a great bloke. I'm very lucky to have been raised by my father. He's a courageous man. He's taught me a lot in my life. But he would still say it's a tragedy that he did not have a father himself for most of his life, that he did not have that support of his own father to guide him through life. And while he's a great man, he has made mistakes in his life, and it's unfortunate that he did not have the stability that he's been able to provide. My mum and himself been able to provide for me and my brother and sister through our growing and formative years. And I myself have 4 sons. They're still in those years, and I try every day to maintain my relationship, not just with my wife but with my sons. It's hard in this job to do that sometimes. It's hard to communicate with 10-year-old boys over the telephone or through Skype. You ask them what they did during the day, they usually say nothing. You ask them what they learned at school, they say stuff. They're not particularly communicative. But I feel it's extremely important. My job as a dad is much more important as my job as a senator, and I do my best to perform that role as a father, because I think having a father, being a dad, is extremely important. That the combination of a mother and a father make for a very nurturing and supportive environment for children. I also want to say that it's not just my personal experience. The evidence on this is abundantly clear, that the best outcome for children, on average, of course on average, there are loving families of many different types, but on average, the best outcome for a child is for their mother and father, their biological mother and father, to remain together married and support their development. There's a very considered and worthy, meritorious sociologist in the United States, a guy called Dr. Charles Murray, and he wrote a book recently called Coming Apart. It's about the US, largely, not about Australia, and it's not just about marriage, it's about more generally the progress and development of white America. He has not included ethnic communities because they do have other issues, and he shows very clearly across a range of different measures, be they delinquency in adolescence, sexual choices, teenagers, crime rates as well, a range of measures. The outcomes on average that are best for children is when they are raised by their biological mother and father who remain married. Another very famous person in the United States, the current president, Barack Obama, wrote a very moving book about Dreams of My Father, where he very eloquently put how much of a tragedy it was that his father did not remain with him for long during his upbringing, and the great vacuum and hole that it put in his life. And while I come back to the fact that President Obama obviously has a different view to me about the institution of marriage, that regardless of what happens in this debate, we should not in any way downplay or diminish the importance of a mother and father for children. And because when we look at the institution of marriage itself and what it means, it has in fact almost always been about the creation of children. And it's not actually an institution that is primarily a religious one or a Judeo-Christian one. In our culture, in our Western European culture, the very word marriage that we use does not come from a Jewish root or a religious root. The word is actually a Latin word. It comes from the word matrimonium in Latin. And in Latin, matrimonium is a combination of two concepts: matri, meaning mother, and monium, meaning the state of being or condition. So the very word that we use today, marriage, actually has its roots in our culture about the creation of children or the becoming of being a mother. Now, that's what it was in Roman society. It was not a Christian society. It was not a Jewish society. It was not a monotheist society. It was also a society, of course, where homosexuality was accepted and a common practice. But it was also a society that had a very defined view and institution and word for marriage. Of course, marriage is important in many religions in the world as well, and in many religions the sacrament of marriage is associated with the union of a man and a woman. It's associated with the becoming one flesh in the terms that are often used in Christianity. And while we often in modern times take becoming one flesh as a metaphorical concept, the union of two people, its roots again have a more direct and practical grounding in the creation of children. That the creation of a child is literally the becoming of one flesh, the union of two people into one flesh through the genetic diffusion of those two peoples into one human being. And I personally think there's not something much more miraculous in our world than the creation of children. And this particular institution that we have that's called marriage has been established to nurture and support that phenomena. And like many institutions that we have that have been handed down to us over time. It's something that we today perhaps not conceive of the importance of it at the time. That we are like in the world of science, we have this wonderful, open, free, prosperous society because we stand on the shoulders of giants that went before us. Like Isaac Newton said, that we are very lucky and fortunate because of what has happened before us and what has been created before us. And marriage is one of those things that has been created and protected over centuries before us. And I worry that if we were to tinker with what marriage means, we would lose something from our society. We would lose a cultural institution from our society that we would struggle to recapture through any other creation of institutions. In some respects, I recognise that this particular debate is a semantic one. It's a debate about the definition of a word. What should the word marriage mean? Should it mean simply the union of two people who love each other, or should it mean the union of two people who not only love each other, indeed, or maybe not a central concept at all, but who can create a child? Now, I actually think, while often it's said that semantic debates are unimportant and it doesn't matter, I disagree. I think words are important. I think language is important. I believe in what Ludwig Wittgenstein said, that if I do not have a word to describe something, I cannot conceive of it, that the limit of my world is the limit of my language. And I worry that if we redefine the scope of what marriage means and is defined as, we will lose our ability as human beings to conceive of a very important, yes, albeit narrow human relationship, which is the union of a man and woman to create a child. That word is important to describe that particular relationship. That is not to denigrate or say that other types of human relationships are any way inferior or superior, but that this particular relationship, a man and a woman coming together to create children, is different. It is unique. It is diverse. Those other relationships, mother-father relationships, brother-sister relationships, homosexual relationships, are clearly very different from a relationship which comes together to create a child. And I believe that we should have a separate institution that allows us to conceive of that particular relationship. We should have a word that describes that particular relationship. And if we change the definition of marriage to not particularly describe that relationship, we'll lose our ability to conceive of and protect that particular idea and institution. And that is not to say that we couldn't find other ways in our society to do this. I am just concerned that we would rush to change an institution so quickly without any real plan and conception of how we are going to celebrate the diversity of heterosexual relationships, which obviously by definition can create the only relationships that can create children. Because sometimes the proponents of a change to the Marriage Act in this debate say that marriage is all about love, and how can you be against two people coming together and being in love? Well, I absolutely accept that love is a necessary condition for a successful marriage, in my view, but it's not a sufficient condition for a marriage as we define it now. Marriage is not only about love, it's also about sacrifice, because when you get married you can't do certain things than you used to be able to do. It's also, as I've said comprehensively in this speech, about the creation of children. It is something different, it is something diverse. And the proponents that want to change this particular act often also at the same time say they want to celebrate diversity. They say they want to celebrate different points of view and different cultures and different ideas. But in fact, changing the Marriage Act in the way that this bill wants to do will not be a celebration of diversity, it will be a celebration of uniformity, because it will make all relationships that just simply involve love between two human beings the same. There won't be a celebration of diversity, there won't be an acceptance of different types of humanity and different types of human relationships, and I think that will reduce and remove some of the colour and imagination that goes with being a human being, and I hope that change is not made But regardless of how this debate evolves, I do hope that respect is given to different points of view in this debate. I this week have been attacked by some fellow senators and been called a bigot for my particular views on this issue by fellow senators. And what I don't quite understand is that some of those senators that throw around these attributes, again, would also say that they respect different religions and cultures and welcome immigration to our country, and also protect, say, the poorer in our society as well. But when you look at who does and does not support marriage, and I accept that at the moment there is a popular support for a change, albeit our evidence is rather superficial, there's also clearly many groups in our society that do not support a change. For example, when you look at the Australian National University survey on political views that's done after every election, only 15% of people of the Muslim faith support a change to the Marriage Act. Are the 85% of Muslims that don't support a change bigots? Are the 60-odd% of Catholics that don't support a change bigots? Are a majority of people in low income levels who don't support a change bigots as well? Because the other striking thing about the evidence about who does and does not support marriage in our community is that it is in fact a luxury good, that the higher income you have, the more likely you are to support marriage. Now, I don't know the answer to why that's the case. I can only surmise. But I would like to say that I grew up in a relatively low socioeconomic area, and I grew up in an area where divorce rates were quite high during my time as a child, and had many friends whose parents did not last. Whereas if you look at the evidence, if you're lucky enough to live in a leafy and well-to-do suburb in our society, most likely your parents stayed married, rather than those that live in lower socioeconomic areas. So, in my view, it's the working class areas of our communities that know and understand the importance of this institution, that know and understand the effects and consequences of a diminution in the importance of marriage and its effects on the wider family environment. And I hope that not only are reviews respected in the debate, that any particular change we make to the law if it happens, respects the views in those changes, respects different views by this change. And turning to this particular bill, I don't believe that this particular bill that's put up duly respects those different views. This bill does exempt ministers of religion from solemnising same-sex marriages, but it does not extend that exemption to individual civil celebrants or to ministers of religion that may practice a religion that does not have a view on same-sex marriage or may support same-sex marriage. And I don't think that's a duly sufficient protection of individual rights, and they are individual rights. These rights that we have, particularly the freedom of religion and belief, a fundamental right in our society, of freedom of religion and belief. That right is not something that's held by the Catholic Church or held by an Islamic mosque or held by a Buddhist temple. Those rights reside in each individual. Those rights reside in each Australian has the right to express a certain religious or belief about a particular issue, and we should respect those views. And in my view, any change to the Marriage Act which does not duly respect those views would be a contravention of the fundamental rights that every Australian has a right to, and also would be a contravention of the international agreements we've signed on human rights, one of which is the agreement on covenant on civil and political rights, which in its Article 23 defines and obliges states signatories to protect and support the creation of families through a marriage between a man and a woman. And the interpretation of that provision by the United Nations Human Rights Committee has been that there is no obligation on states to change their marriage acts to include same-sex couples, and because there's no obligation according to the United Nations, in my view, there is certainly no rationale for forcing Australians with a different view to solemnise same-sex marriages. So I look forward to a wider debate on this issue over the coming years, I return to where I started. I hope that there can be a respectful debate and an informed debate, and any change we make to an institution that's lasted centuries is made after such a debate.